Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Soul Current podcast. My name is Lisa D. And before we begin today, I just want to take a quick moment to gently orient anyone who might be joining us for the first time. And if that's you, welcome. Very nice to have you here. Chances are you're on some type of spiritual journey. Most of us are. That's why we're learning this. That's why we're here. We want to know, what is all this stuff that I'm going through? How do I work through it so I can start manifesting the things that I long for, the things that I desire? Well, I was where you are. I had all those same questions. I longed for answers, and I started to get them. I started receiving enough information that I realized, oh my gosh, this really could be the missing piece, the secret, if you will. And there was a first movement that I called the stirring. And so we've already talked about that in previous episodes. I really encourage you to go back and listen to the other episodes. But the stirring is really that discomfort, that restlessness, that feeling of, I feel like there's more. You're no longer okay doing what once felt okay. You know, it's just now you just have a level of discomfort there. And we talked about what happens when you stop trying to ignore the restless feeling and you lean into it and you start to say, okay, well, what is this? That's really the moment you cross over a threshold into something called the awakening. And there's so many different books, thousands of year old scripts that talk about the awakening. It's a very powerful movement. And it's really where awareness begins to open up and truth starts to surface. But here's something else that comes along with awakening. The moment you lean into the stirring and you cross that threshold into the awakening, boom, fear and self-doubt show up. Not days later, weeks later, months later, almost immediately, fear and self-doubt show up. Why? What does it look like? How do you deal with it? I answer all of those questions in other episodes. Again, I have to encourage you to listen to them. Chances are it's going to help you through a very difficult period of this part of your spiritual journey. We also talked about the difference between your soul and your spirit, because there is a difference. Only recently did I learn that we do, in fact, have a soul and a spirit. I always thought those were just two different words for the same thing, but they are not. Your spirit, for example, is untouched by life experiences. It is a direct link to the universe or your higher power or God, whatever language you want to use. It is not affected by the life you experience, whereas your soul is. It does hold on to the scars and the battle wounds and all of life's events and the stories we tell and the shield we put up to protect ourselves. So when you're going through life and you hear the restlessness, where's that coming from? Is it your soul or your spirit? We covered that. Today, though, we arrive somewhere new, somewhere that a lot of people just are not ready for or prepared for. It's the moment when awakening stops being something you only understand. It's one thing to get a whole bunch of information and go, wow, that makes so much sense. It's another thing when you actually experience the awakening on a physical level, on an emotional level, and on a rational level. And that is where we start today. So if you've been feeling strange sensations, maybe you've been really, really cold, maybe hot hands, hot feet, warm chest, emotional waves, you're up, you're down, you can't make sense of it, dreams that are really vivid. They can be vivid great. They can even be vivid scary. If any of this is you, chances are you are now officially experiencing the awakening. So we are talking today about the evidence of the awakening and what it feels like when alignment starts to enter the body. So if you're ready, let's rise. There is this moment in the awakening journey. It's an amazing journey. through this awakening phase. But there's a moment when it stops being something you just get. You know, it stops being about information and intellectually understanding it. And it starts to become something you actually experience. So it's no longer just spiritually. You're physically experiencing it. You're emotionally experiencing it. Of course, yes, even rationally. But it is a phase that not a lot of people are prepared for. It's hard to prepare yourself for kind of this upheaval. It's intense, can be overwhelming, and it's really hard to prepare yourself for something when you don't even know what's coming your way to begin with, right? That's the benefit of this particular episode. Now you'll know. It really is the moment where awakening enters your body and you notice it. So if you've noticed strange things, like for me, cold was a big one. Sometimes I could be cold for like half an hour, 45 minutes, and it didn't matter. One morning I had the heat on, a hot cup of coffee, and I had the oven on because I was sitting directly in front of it to get the heat from, and nothing was warming me up. And that's because energy, when it moves, especially if it's been energy that's been stuck in your body and you're now moving it, you feel these sensations. Cold is one of them. Heat is another. I would be sitting there sometimes and my one hand would get very hot. So you might experience warmth in your hands or your feet, even your chest. Another really prominent experience I had was emotional waves. So I could have a great day, but all of a sudden by the end of the day, I would be very emotional. I didn't have any reason for the grief, but the tears were huge. It was like I got a piece of really bad news and I was devastated, yet none of that happened. It feels like there's something wrong, right? Because you're just up and down and up and down. So if you're experiencing that, now you know why. There's nothing wrong with you here. Vivid dreams are another one. My dreams got very vivid. I would have like really great dreams, but I would also have these very vivid, terrifying dreams, being chased, things running up the basement stairs, trying to get into the room, that like just terrifying stuff. But there's a lot of symbolism there. And that's why we have those vivid dreams. Your subconscious is coming through, your nervous system is coming through in dreams because of the symbolism. If you notice that your life is beginning to rearrange itself in unexpected ways, then you just got to know this. Take this with you today. You are not breaking down. There is nothing wrong with you. In fact, all of that is showing you are now integrating. And integrating is a big thing. So let's look at it this way. Your nervous system is there to protect you. That's its job. So when you start leaning into the stirring and you've crossed that threshold into the awakening where you're saying, hey, you know what? Maybe I'm not the cop. Maybe I'm not the nurse. Maybe I'm not just the stay-at-home parent. Maybe I'm not whatever your old identity is. That kickstarts your nervous system into territory that's very unknown. And it goes, oh my gosh, are you sure? What if you fail? What if you're not good enough? What if nobody eats this or buys this or wants this or whatever the fill in the blank is for you? Your nervous system is kicking in as an attempt to protect you because you're starting to move into uncharted territory, and that makes your nervous system nervous. Okay? The idea here is that you don't judge it. You've got to just understand it's there to protect you. And so what will happen during this integration phase is you're now starting to unwind all of those stories that have been built up over the course of your lifetime. And those stories have created our protective shield. And we're trying to uncoil that. And this is really all of that inner work you hear people talk about when they talk about manifestation. And not a lot of people dive into the inner work. Some do, but not a lot do. And those that do tend to not really dive in deep enough for you to understand how imperative it is you do the inner work. You can't manifest the life of your dreams If you have a scarred nervous system or a nervous system that's always kicked into survival mode, always wanting to protect, so consistently filling you with fear and self-doubt, it doesn't work. You need to be able to calm that part of yourself so it feels safe enough to allow you to work your way through these processes, align with the highest part of yourself so that when you do those manifestation exercises and techniques, you now start to see everything unfold for you. That truly is the missing piece here when we talk about inner work, inner healing. This is what we're referencing. Integrating is the beginning of that healing. One of the ways that your conscious awareness expands, by the way, is when your subconscious releases what it's been holding. How does it do that? One of the best ways is through dreams. That's what makes these dreams so vivid. They can also be very emotional. Have you ever had a dream where you're wailing in the dream, just bawling your eyes out? When you wake up, you feel like you're actually crying? That's an emotional dream that is coming from your subconscious. It's very powerful, and it tends to happen a lot more as you work your way through the awakening. You can also notice that your dreams are filled with like childhood homes or places you used to go when you were a child, or maybe former relationships as well. And then sometimes there's even themes. Sometimes for me, not a lot, but certainly it did happen on more than one occasion, and it sticks out in my mind as this theme of being chased. I remember one really terrifying dream where I was in this house by myself, and I had a feeling somebody was in the basement because my cat would keep looking at the door and hissing. And I happened to turn my head to look in one direction. When I looked back, the door to the basement was open a little bit, and my cat had gotten down there. And I could hear him hissing and growling at something down there. So I called up for him, and he came upstairs immediately. But as he reached the top of the stairs, he looked behind him and hissed. And when I was going to close the door, I could hear somebody running up the stairs really fast. And I slammed the door closed. So as you can imagine, waking up at 2:00 in the morning, it's pitch black, and that's how I woke up. It's terrifying. And that's all part of your subconscious beginning to release what it's been holding on to. These are not regressions. Just know that. They're not regressions. All part of the integration. You're unwinding old stories. You're releasing things you buried. You're releasing things you held on to. So the psyche is actually reorganizing itself now around the truth, around the information that you've gathered that is hitting you in a very truthful place. And dreams really are the soul's way of completing what the waking mind just cannot yet fully process. And so that's what's happening when you have those really vivid dreams. Another part of the awakening phase, for me, it could be quite exhausting. And again, you might experience one or two of these. You might experience all of them. You might experience this emotional part I'm about to talk about and not feel that it had that much of an impact on you. And that's totally fine. For me, this emotional phase that I call the emotional detox, it was tiring. Because emotionally, you're heightened so much that you just feel tired. But I call it the emotional detox. And that's because there's some very specific experiences you might have. You might have these sudden waves of grief, but with no clear story. Remember, I was just explaining to you, I had a great day. But by the end of that day, I was just overcome with sadness. And when I went into a room by myself for a few minutes, I was bawling these huge tears. And I'm like, what is happening to me? I couldn't explain it at the time. But when I learned about the awakening and what the emotional detox phase is, I realized what was happening to me. There's also unexpected joy. It's not just grief. You might just have this really exciting, profound feeling of joy, and you don't know why, but you just love it, and that's great. Enjoy that. I had days of irritability. My poor husband. I don't know. I'm normally a very patient, very tolerant person, but I would have these days where I had zero tolerance. My level was just non-existent and I didn't get it, right? But I just want you to understand something. It's not emotional instability. That's not what's going on. This is called what I refer to as the emotional detox. All that stored emotional energy that once kept us, by the way, in a survival mode, it's now being returned to movement. It's flowing through our body and we're feeling it. It might come in the form of tears or elation or irritability or anger, but it's moving. And with that, by the way, comes those earlier topics of hot and cold sensations. That's what happens when energy moves. Emotion really is just energy remembering how to flow again. So we don't bury it. We don't hold it in. We don't ignore it. We allow it to be what it is, to flow so we can release it. And once we do all of this, that's when something pretty big happens. We start to align on an inner level with our spiritual self. You got that soul, you got that spirit, and now you're aligning with your spiritual self. And as a result, by the way, our outer world has to reorganize to match the inner one. That's how it works. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. That's how it works. So as a result, you might notice some things. You might notice relationships that were once so fulfilling, they just aren't. They're shifting naturally, not because you're judging, not because of anger, just don't connect anymore. Or old roles that you were in are now dissolving. Things that you always did that always felt natural to you, it's just not cutting it anymore. But then there's the new invitations. You just all of a sudden you're getting new invitations to join somebody on something or join a new team and things you didn't ever see happening before. It really is that strange feeling where you're in between worlds. And you can feel that, by the way. You feel like you're at the beginning of one world and still got a foot in the other world, and it's a feeling. But that's what alignment does. It rearranges our life completely, and it's not being done to punish us. Not in the least. It's actually there to free us. We hold on to so much stuff, we hold on to anger and sadness and grief and old memories that don't make us feel anything positive, but we hold on to it. And alignment allows us to release them. So it's freeing us. What no longer matches who you are becoming will lose its grip and slowly be released. Isn't that incredible? I loved how freeing I felt as I moved through the awakening phase. Now, just know true alignment, by the way, it's not loud. Where the awakenings seem to be a bit louder, alignment isn't. That's not what happens there. It doesn't come in with like light that fills a room one day. You just wake up and walk out to your living room and the heavens above have entered the living room. It doesn't do that. It doesn't announce itself. It really just stabilizes us. And what I mean by that is that we have a lot less of things, less desire to prove ourselves, less desire to perform, less craving for validation. And don't so many of us crave validation? Validation in our parenting style, validation at work, just always looking for validation from one place or another. And with alignment, you crave that a whole lot less. And you also notice too when you're not in alignment. So once you start to feel what being in alignment is like, you don't want to not be in alignment. So guess what that means? You establish very clear boundaries. You protect your alignment, and you do so with inner stillness. So don't be surprised if all of a sudden you want to start breathing exercises more or doing more meditation or taking up yoga, because inner stillness does seem to become a pull, a craving. Inner stillness is very important. Alignment is quiet. It's really quiet, a whole lot quieter than the ego, but it's a whole lot stronger than fear. And we know the feeling of fear is intense, but alignment is stronger than that. So in closing, what I really want you to understand is this. If you are in that awakening phase and you just feel that your body feels strange to you right now, it's totally normal. It happens to everyone that is going through the awakening phase. If you feel that it's disrupting your life, yeah, you're not the only one. It's all part of the process. There is nothing wrong. What you want to know is that something sacred is happening to you. The body does not awaken to scare us. It's not doing this to say, hey, I know how we can completely upend your life here. That's not what it's doing. Something sacred is happening to you while you're going through this. It's awakening, not to frighten you, but to bring you home. So keep focusing, keep practicing, and keep rising. Till next time, friends. Hey, I hope you enjoyed this podcast episode. Be sure to check out my YouTube channel, The Soul Current Podcast with Lisa D. Over there, we have guided meditations, guided visualizations, some journal entry suggestions, daily exercises you can use to help keep you on track and see you through the movements and experiences you're going through. That's The Soul Current Podcast with Lisa D on YouTube. Thanks for listening.